Hello, everyone. This is Damon with MBTV, and today's topic is going to be a variety of things. It actually is going to be more of an open discussion regarding Enneagram and some of our studies with Enneagram. So far, it's just me, so I will imagine that some people will pop in here. Trey's going to be here, so just to give him a few minutes, he probably will show up. In the meantime, I'll discuss some of the things that I've been kind of learning about Enneagram thus far. So, one of the things that we have is we have a lot of different Enneagram theories. Because it's open source, we go in these ideas and notions and all this stuff that, okay, is it tri-type theory that's accurate? Is it phobic of all types? Is it this person's theory? Is it Rizzo? Is it Hudson? Is it, Ishazo? Is it there's so many, Naranjo, there's so many different variations of the same conceptual idea of Enneagram. And we look at these different theories and we try to extract what is relevant to us in this period of whatever it may be that you're dealing with. So in this particular instance, it may be that you're dealing with a identity thing. You want to kind of find out what your personality is. Like you're kind of using it like it's MBTI. For some people, it's a spiritual tool. It's a tool to help them find themselves and become more focused on what it is that they want to get out of life, enhance their own road to enlightenment, whatever it may be. And for some people, it's a fun thing to do. And for some people, it's a obsession where it's like they just really love it and they want to study it. And a lot of the great people who advanced Enneagram are in that obsessive category. But regardless of what it is, what the reason or motive is, it's important to understand to look at these different variations of Enneagram and what it is. So, Taylor, I temporarily muted you. I had some music going, so I got you on mute now. So you can unmute yourself whenever. But welcome. Glad you're able to join us. And so that being said, so there's a lot of concepts about Enneagram out there that a lot of people are looking at having. So they have this conversation with Enneagram, which is, I love the tri-type theory, or I love this theory. So whatever it is, you've got to kind of, when you're speaking with other people about Enneagram, you have to understand where they're coming from with it. So Enneagram could be a aspect of, maybe it's I'm using this tool for tri-type because I best relate to this. It's kind of like when you compare MBTI and Socionics, a lot of people get kind of angry or irritated because you're coming from a different standpoint of how you're using that tool to enhance yourself. You'll find that some people actually don't perfectly fit into any MBTI type because it is a system of theories. And then some people don't perfectly fit into Socionics types or sociotypes or even Enneagram types. You'll find the combination. So having different variations of these theories tends to be very practical for a lot of people, and it can actually be beneficial instead of trying to consolidate everything into this is the way it is. Now, you do have those different ones that are pretty, I would say, canonical with traditional values or traditional understanding of these tools. So that being said, there's a lot of aspects of Enneagram, but when you're looking at the angles of Enneagram, then you're starting to get into this understanding. Okay, I see where you come from. You're trying to study or understand the tri-type, or you may believe that every type has a counter type. So you have Enneagram, these 9 types of Enneagram. Then you have the counter or the counterphobic of that type. So you have the regular type, and then you have subtypes. Enneagram breaks down into thousands of different types, apparently, if you really dive into it, understanding tri-types, and then how all 9 Enneagram types manifest in your personality. Because it does. We're all using Enneagram as vantage points to further understand ourselves and other people. And you'll find that pretty much every fixation on the Enneagram is somewhere present in our personalities. Those who still struggle with the ego, which is the majority of us. So, Taylor, welcome. And was there anything you wanted to jump on as far as Enneagram goes, or anything in general?
No, I actually don't know all that much about Enneagram, relatively so.
Okay.
I saw the flash come up and I clicked through.
Right. Well, cool. So we'll start talking about that. And let me welcome to the show. How do you say your name?
Niharika.
I'm sorry?
Niharika.
Niharika?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So welcome. Like I said, this is open discussion. The center topic is Enneagram, but obviously it's going to kind of vary from that. The only stipulation is just mute your microphone when you're not using it. That way we don't have any background noise. But as soon as you're feel free to talk, just unmute that and then hop on whenever. So I just got kind of done explaining some of the different systems of Enneagram as far as tri-type goes. I didn't explain what those systems are, but understanding how to use those systems. And so Trey asked, if you destroy your ego, what should you replace it with? And I think that's actually somebody on the YouTube comments. And the good question, that is a good question. And you don't replace ego, because that's ego actually looking for something to fill. If you actually eliminate your ego, and I say eliminate as in you come to terms with it and fully understand that it's not in a state of non-identity, as in this is not who I am, but it's a tool that I use, and you can maintain that in the sense of you are in touch with who you are. Aside from the ego, you don't need it, because everything is perfect as is. So if you're looking for replacements, if you think you've destroyed your ego and you're looking for replacements, it's your ego has deceived you. And again, you're looking to fulfill a void in yourself. And that is where the key is. That is where the trick is, to understand if your ego is playing tricks on you and saying, okay, I'm gone. Now what do I need to fill this with? Because if you're looking for something, or you feel as if something is missing, then that's another level of ego. Right. So the idea behind the Enneagram is understanding that, we have perfection as is. And if you look at the vantage points or the holy ideas of Enneagram, and you actually look at those aspects, you actually see the full totality of reality, which is what it is. Right. So I'll pull up some Enneagram notes here in a second. So would you like to add anything? You're both on, everybody's on mute, so unmute yourself if you'd like to add. I'm going to pull these Enneagram notes, and I will give you a little more information.
Could you define what ego does within tri-type? Because I know that I'm a mover shaker, and how does ego, how is it defined, and how does it relate to the fears, which is what I thought it was all about.
Right. Yeah. So the ego is ultimately rooted in fear, regardless of if it is you're a fear center or you're your standard. You have three centers. You have your fear center, you have your shame center, then you have your anger center. Essentially is how they break Enneagram down, but it's all sorted in fear. Every type has a core fear. And so the way the tri-type works is understanding and identifying and seeing those core fears manifest in your personality at some level. Because if I break myself down and I go, here is my tri-type, I'm also 8 through 7. So I can break this down and I can say, okay, I have a core fear. Obviously, I've mentioned this many times on my videos. Core fear of vulnerability. That's my primary fear, is being exposed or weak or being controlled. And that's the core fear. But then again, you can look at the 3 and you recognize the core fear is you saying of being worthless or not being able to contribute, right? Not being able to add value. And that's a core fear. And then you can start seeing these core fears in yourself. There's one that's kind of overpowering in your personality. There's one that's kind of like, this is the one that's obviously the most. And it kind of, as an 8, it's hard to even recognize the other core fears in your personality, because 8s are in this state of, they're in false denial. So they actually deny most of their fears, like as if they don't exist. And so 8s go ahead.
It was interesting. I just started looking at videos. It was interesting watching videos on YouTube about type 8 and going, maybe, I have no idea.
Right. Yeah, with Enneagram, 8s actually struggle the most as really finding their type, I think, in my own understanding. And the reason is because the Enneagram is a tool for understanding fears, and 8s actually deny so much of their own fears. They actually struggle finding out anything beyond 8. Okay, yeah, I can relate to that if I'm really honest with myself. But then where I don't see how I can create a tri-type, because none of these other things make sense, because they've been in denial of all these fears for so long. And that's that sense of false denial. Then when they start looking and start removing those layers, you can start seeing all other 8 Enneagram types manifest in your personality in smaller degrees, of course. So if it's 3, again, it's this fear of being worthless, and that 7 that comes out, the fear of pain or the avoidance of pain, and overthinking, sometimes impulsiveness. And that comes from, you're probably 8 wing 7 as well, right?
8 through 7.
Okay, yeah, that would probably slant you to 8 wing 7 as well as your core type, right? Oh, you're still on mute, Taylor, sorry.
What is the
Oh, I got you back on mute again.
Okay, 8, then 3, then 7 in that order from greatest to least. So yeah, 8 through 7, 8 wing 7. The tri-type makes a lot more sense to me than the wings, but yeah, that could certainly be because I don't know what I don't know.
Right. right. So the wings basically are slant in a certain direction. You'll see that some eights, because we can't classify, it's too categorical in the sense of all eights are this way. So it's kind of full. Tri-type does the same thing. I mean, you can almost ignore the wings and go with tri-type. But again, tri-type you're going to see still classified as mover shaker. How are they different within this type? Then you can go into subtypes like 8-wing 7, 3-wing 4, 3-wing 2, or 7-wing 8, or 7-wing 6. And you can look at those different variations of the tri-types as well. And then your sexual tri-types, your social tri-types, and then your self-preserving tri-types. I believe Trey had a theory that each element in your tri-type has a different instinctual variant, which I don't know 100% about. I think that your instinctual variants remain the same, but I do know that Trey has been exploring that concept. That, for example, in my tri-type, I have obviously been an open mind, and I look at it and I go, okay, I'm an SX8, and then I'm an SO3, which would make sense, and then a 7 SP is basically Trey's concept. And again, Trey, do you want to elaborate on that? Trey, you have no audio. Now you're on mute. So make sure you're off the boulder. Zero audio. All right, well, we'll get back to you, Trey. I don't know what's going on with your audio, but it's absent. So, you asked how long did it take for you to realize your core fear after you encountered the Enneagram? For me personally, the answer would be pretty instantaneously. I've been in self-discovery for a while, like looking at myself. Before I started looking at my own psychology, I was pretty much a stereotypical ENTJ8. There was no variation within my own personality. I mean, I fit the description. I felt kind of canned almost, but that was way before psychology. Once I started getting my own psychology, I started making a lot of changes, and it took a lot of work. And obviously, I took on mentors to alter that. So by the time that I actually came across Enneagram, I was so familiar with myself that I instantaneously knew this is not the journey for a lot of people. A lot of people, they start off with Enneagram, and it's harder to find out what that core fear is. And 8s, again, they're in a very denial aspect. So 8s may look through the whole Enneagram and go, no, none of this makes sense. That you may get that from 8s if they're looking at it from an angle of fears. Now, if they're looking at desires, that can actually smooth the process. But I wouldn't recommend really either of those ways as far as really exploring the Enneagram. I think the best way of exploring the Enneagram is looking at the instinctual centers first. How do you operate? And then narrowing it down.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're clear.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, what were you asking?
You sound super like you're on a telephone, but I mean, it's okay. It's not robotic or anything. It's just telephone frequency, but I think you're good to go.
I lost my headphones. Sorry.
Do what?
I had to borrow Maddie's headphones. I lost mine.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, what was the question now?
I was talking about your Enneagram theory. Are you still on that different instinctual variant for each type and the tri-type?
Oh, yeah. So, thing is, I never really went into that for a long time, but for a while, when I did look at it, it made a lot of sense. And the basic idea is just that if one of your, if you look around the web, people on the internet, they typically have like, oh yeah, I'm a type 8 and I'm SXSO, as an example. But issue is that some people just say they're a type 8SX. They never bring in the SO. So I always wondered why that was. I never really found an answer. But then what I started to do was look around, and I found this book that talked about each type with their different instinctual variant and what they look like, how they came across. And so what I wondered was, all right, well, if I'm a type 5 and then I have my other Enneagram types and my tri-type, what if I take the type 5 and say, okay, I'm an SX type 5, so let me read that description and compare it to the other type 5 descriptions, like SO and SP. And I related to SX the most. So then I went to the next next number in my tri-type, and I said, okay, well, I believe this is SO. So let me read the descriptions and see, if I relate to it the most. And sure enough, I related to that one the most as well. And then I looked at my third tri-type number, and that related to the SP description. And so it was like, when I read that, I was like, that's crazy. So I started to look at yours, for example, and I remember I sent it over to you, and you said you related to it, and I saw that in him as well. And so it's like, what I started to figure out, well, at least from my own conclusions, was just that it makes a lot of sense to take SX, SO, SP, and for each of your types in your tri-type to carry one of those instinctual variants. I could be wrong, but from what I had learned and from what I had personally experienced with it, it made a lot of sense for me. So who knows? Maybe just for me, I just so happen to have an SX type 5, SO type 1, and SP type 4. I don't know. I'd have to look through them again because I don't remember which one was which for the 1 and 4. But point being that when I looked it up, I was like, that matches really well for me, and it matched for you and for Daniel. So I was like, I think I'll roll with it. So.
Yeah, and I kind of agreed with the aspects of that too. But there's a lot of what I said earlier. Basically, we can all use it as a tool to further explore ourselves, whether we stick completely to theory or not. I got a few other questions I do want to answer. If anybody wants to add to that, as far as what Trey said, feel free. Like I said, this is more of an open discussion. It's not like I have a particular agenda. But I do have a question that's a little off topic. I'm going to answer it quickly. But from the audience here, it says, as an ENTJ, how does an unhealthy SE affect you? Well, I don't really consider my SE unhealthy. So I wouldn't say that it affects me negatively. I think my using of SE actually has made me more complete. I think that the biggest issue I have is still a lack of tolerance for, well, let me put it this way. I have a lack of patience with people who may not learn as quickly, or a lack of patience with inefficiency. But as far as my SE being unhealthy, I wouldn't go as far as saying a particular psychological perspective is unhealthy. I would say the biggest thing that's unhealthy in my psychological perspective is a cynical worldview, which is, people are selfish and narcissistic, which could be true. But I would say that could be an unhealthy perspective, but I wouldn't pin that solely on SE. That is more of my entire psychological perspective, which I've worked through over the past 5 years, and reducing the overall cynicism and allowing more opportunity in my life. But I wouldn't say that it's just pinned on SE per se. So as far as that goes, hopefully that gives you an idea to say that, it's hard to pinpoint a perspective on a function in the first place, right? You can't go, oh, well, this is SE. It could be SE, but I mean, we're talking about the cognitive functions of Jungian theory, or are we talking about information metabolizing elements of socionics? And even then, how are you pinning it on a particular function? This can be a very complex process. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I see it as a waste of time, right? You can simply say, oh, I have a negative worldview, I need to fix it. Or, where's my negative worldview coming from? It's coming from extroverted sensing. Maybe I should go run outside, play in a park. And you're going to go in this giant circle, which is a waste of time. I think you can solve the problem just by identifying what it is and maybe what is causing it, more so than identifying what psychological perspective or what cognitive function it is. So I wouldn't go as far as defining it that way. So I hope that answers that question. Now, we'll hop back on Enneagram. Got another question here. Is it bad to be proud of being a self-preservation Enneagram 3 and not evolved? I would say yes, it's not bad. I would say that it's more good that you're taking pride in being something. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's okay to identify with it and be like, hey, that's me. A lot of people do that. I mean, most people who like MBTI or Enneagram or whatever are labeling themselves and attaching ideas to these labels. It depends on what your objective is. Not everybody sets an objective in reality to become spiritually enlightened. So if that's not your objective, then if you don't feel a calling to that, then don't, just be you. But if you find yourself suffering or in pain or incredibly stressed or something like that, maybe it's something to do with your ego attachments that's creating that dynamic for you, and it would cause something to explore. I'm not saying everybody needs to be a spiritual being as far as achieving enlightenment. That may not be the underlying purpose of your existence here. It could be something else. So if there is even a purpose, right? So that's for you to explore. But if you're completely 100% honest with yourself and you're 100% satisfied with everything about a self-preservation Enneagram 3 and you love it and you're enjoying your life and you're happy, I don't think that's a problem at all. So that would be my opinion on that as well. So yeah, and Kaylin, you don't think ego can be destroyed? It can't be destroyed. You try to attack the ego, destroy the ego, you're going to create more layers of ego. So if you think it can be destroyed, you think you've destroyed it, you're probably just deceiving yourself again. Ego can't be destroyed. It can only be accepted. The best counterintuitive way to approach your ego is to bring it into full acceptance and recognizing its existence and place in your life. You don't destroy it. Destroying the ego is a survival mechanism, or the ego itself is a survival mechanism. Why would you destroy it? You have to learn to appreciate it, and that's the key. It's actually counterintuitive because people find it as a place of pain, a point of pain. But if you learn to accept its perspective and its role in your life, that's where the peace comes from. It's not so much I have to kill my ego or to remove myself from the ego. It's more of identifying that, okay, the ego is not me, but it has a role in my life, and it's my thoughts and it's my perspective on life, but it's not necessarily me, my own identity. And that's where that point of peace comes from ultimately. So, and one more question. It says, do you think that Enneagram lacks a lot to be ranked as one of the best personality tests? Enneagram has been around for thousands of years. And so many people are overly obsessed with this. The science doesn't back it up. The science doesn't back it up. But let me tell you this. I don't care if the science backs it up. You know, like, as far as credibility goes, if it's helping you and it's helping people find themselves, and I'm watching people use it as a tool to enhance their lives, whether it's Enneagram, whether it's religion, whether it's cooking breakfast for their husbands or wives in the morning, I don't care. If it's making you feel better and it's helping you come to terms with yourself, who cares about the research or credibility? I mean, unless you're competing in that, if you're starting an Enneagram business, maybe that's one thing. But as far as like using it as a tool, credibility, I don't care if you're in astrology. None of that matters to me. If you're finding something to be beneficial for you, and some people need that. Some people need that anchor. Like I said, whether it's religion or whatever, religion is a huge anchor for a lot of people. It kind of gives them a purpose or meaning. So if you have that and it's helping you and it's making you and it's enhancing your life and the lives of those around you, I don't care if it has credibility or not. But to answer your question, I would say that it is ranked as one of the best personality tests, but it is not heavily researched. It is hard to research cognitive functions because they're not observed, except information metabolizing elements in Socionics are observed. They're output oriented. The cognitive functions are not. They're only input and processing oriented. So those are hard to research. Enneagram is almost impossible to research. How do you possibly research? I say almost impossible. You can still ask questions and survey, but people can lie. And you can't really observe if they're afraid of this particular aspect or not. You can't really observe that. They can only give you so much data. And if they're being honest, I guess you could research it, but you can't really research core fears. A counterphobic 6 can lie and tell you they're not afraid of anything. How do you know? Do you just expose them to their fears? So there's these questions that you have to ask when you're identifying if something is credible or not. But in my history of being a coach, I found that Enneagram and MBTI have been extremely helpful for a lot of people. And whether they're credible or not entirely credible I don't really care about that so much. I find that it's been very life-saving for myself included, and I don't know where I'd be without a lot of this direction and a lot of mentorship and the community that it's built. These particular things have built amazing communities that have reached beyond the original principle of self-research. They've gone into creating friendships and relationships from across the globe. And that's, to me, is way more important than if something's credible or not. Should I avoid it? Should I avoid these people who are interested in self-discovery simply because they believe in something different? This is not my approach to living. So I'll let some of the other guys here in this chat speak up if they want to add anything to that. So Trey, Taylor, anybody else, if you want to add something, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that because you were talking about the Enneagram being a tool. I have a friend of mine that I was actually sharing a lot of the Enneagram with and just talking about a lot of the ideas I've had and the application that I've seen you can use the Enneagram for. And he was super interested in all of it. And he thought it was super cool. His mind was blown, walked away, you know. And he was like, man, like, changed everything. Just knowing how to use the Enneagram, how to use it as a tool in relationships with my friends, with, you know, my girlfriend, everything. He was just like, it's like, man, this is awesome. And so personally, I know how it's given me a lot of clarity in seeing what's really going on behind the surface. And that's exactly how he describes it, is that when you see things in front of you, you think things are so simple and basic and easy to understand when you look at like conflicts, but really it's like it runs much deeper. And when you can see that, you can reveal it in your own relationships and in your own life, and be able to use that as a tool to solve conflicts and to really get down to the root of the issue, the core of the issue. That's something that it's a powerful tool. And to just say, oh yeah, no, the Enneagram is not credible, or the Enneagram hasn't fully been researched, so how do we know that it's legit? The thing is, when it comes to a lot of psychology and when it comes to the brain and a lot of studies and research like that, there's no real conclusion. There's a lot of things that they don't know about. And when it comes to human emotions, that's one of those things that's really hard to understand and really hard to actually form legitimate conclusions on. So there's sciences like NLP, where people are like, they're supposed to help these problems. They're supposed to get down to the root and the core of these issues. And people think they're not legitimate. People think that NLP isn't a legitimate science, and yet it helps people all the time. So, when it comes to that, regardless of whether or not it's a legitimate science, if it's working for you and it's a great tool and you're using it well, or it's helping for your life, then that's really what it's about.
Yeah, I definitely think that, like I said, for me, it is a tool that has helped people. As far as NLP goes, there's nothing wrong with visualization or, imagining something that's not real. For example, if you're practicing a sport and let's say basketball is your choice of sport, or football or whatever, how many times have you visualized getting the perfect catch, and how has it helped your performance? Does that work? There are studies that say it does. People who visualize can, enhance their performance. So yeah, it works. I mean, to some extent. And that's essentially, if I were to oversimplify what NLP is, it's just mental programming, just like visualizing or, changing a modality. And kinesthetic learning is part of NLP. Yeah, that would be part of NLP. Now, there's another question I want to answer here. It says, what if you can relate to your type behavior, but not to the core fear? Could it just be that you're not conscious of it? And yeah, that's true. You could not be conscious of your own core fears. As you start diving in yourself, what you're going to find out is, let me just fly through all 9 Enneagrams really quick, and so you guys understand the main thing that is happening. I talked about this last time. It's called the Enneagram of passions, okay? Enneagram 9, their passion is indolence or slothfulness or inaction, or however you want to label that, laziness in a way. And so this is the biggest issue that they suffer when they start approaching their own inner world. They get into this modality of, okay, I'm approaching the inner world. You know what? I'll do this later. Or, you know what? This isn't really important. Oh, you know what? This is a really good song. I love this song, so I'm not going to dive into my own world. The one is their passion is anger. So when they start diving into their own world, they start feeling a sense of anger or rage or irritation. And what they do is, instead of allowing that to manifest, ones don't like and are rejecting of their own anger. They think anger is a very immoral thing. So when they start feeling that, they're shutting it down. So they're not trying to, like a 9 is trying to avoid their own inner world. The 1 is actually angry in their inner world, and they try to reject their anger. And so this actually eliminates their self-exploration. The Enneagram of passions is where 1 isn't able to really get into their own inner world, essentially. The Enneagram 2, it's pride. Right? I am a helpful person. This is the image that I've created. This is the type of association they've created with Enneagram of passions with Enneagram 2. Right? I'm a good person. I take care of people. I do this. I am recognized for this. I can't be a bad person. So they have this sense of pride, which prevents them from actually exploring themselves and finding out, okay, maybe you're not as inflated as you've made yourself to be. Maybe you do those things out of your own self-interest. And instead of sticking with those things and letting those things sit with them, the Enneagram 2 almost avoids their own inner world in the sense of pride. Enneagram 3, it's lying. It's deceit. They actually lie to themselves. Okay, they think they are something they are not. Right? The Enneagram 3, maybe they think they're an expert in a particular thing, or they think they're successful in a particular way, or they think they're an overachiever in another way, and they identify with this so much that they actually deny that they have actually any internal issues at all. So they're not interested in, a lot of times, exploring their own inner world. until they have that confidant almost that can tell them, hey, I think you're running from this, or I think you're avoiding this. So the Enneagram has this Enneagram 3. And if you have a 3 and an 8 in your tri-type, you're kind of shit out of luck, because you're not only avoiding your inner world by lying to yourself, but you're also denying that you have any fears in the first place. So it makes self-exploration really, really hard to do as far as having those 2 in your tri-type. Enneagram 3, I have read that Enneagram 3 is the hardest to pass. It's the hardest to dive into. It's the hardest to actually explore. If your Enneagram 3 is your core type, the spiritual journey is going to be exceptionally difficult for you, because you're identified with things that aren't even you. So you're actually going to be exploring your own images, but they're not images that are even rooted in your own personality. They're images you've created. So it's just a ton of layers, like peeling back an onion. It's going to take a long time for most Enneagram 3s. Again, time is actually, in my opinion, it's manufactured by the mind or psychological perspective. So that being said, time is not of essence. I can't say an Enneagram 3 is going to take 5 minutes or 10 years. I can't tell you that. I just can tell you that what I have read is Enneagram 3s have the most struggle as far as their spiritual journey goes. Enneagram 4, envy. They're finding other things to appreciate that they want in their own life, so they tend to put their own selves in denial, and exploring oneself is not their typical path. Exploring oneself is not the aspect of Enneagram 4. They find that there's other things they need and want that make them more complete. So it's adding those things to their life. Enneagram 5 is greed. It's holding on to what they do have. Enneagram 5 avoids their own internal world by saying, I have this knowledge, I have this knowledge. It's this continuous pursuit of almost knowledge in a way, of it hanging on to, and we say greed, people think it's always material. This is not the case. In my experience, Enneagram 5s are not very materialistic, not holding on to items per se. It's more of concepts and self-pictures and self-understanding. So if I tell an Enneagram 5, I think you're running from this. Enneagram 5s, no, I've already thought about that. I don't think that's the case. I've already done that. Already went through that. Already done that road. Already went down that road. They're very, very much holding on to their own concepts of self-exploration, to where they generally think they have the answers. So when they dive deep, they may not have the particular answers for themselves, because they don't oftentimes they don't feel a need to sit with what they're feeling, because they think they have the answer already. It's almost a hanging on to this concept or this notion, instead of sitting with something and allowing it to be open-ended and saying, okay, I'm just going to empty my cup and see what comes to fruition. It's a lot of that subconscious speak. I've broken these down into an NLP categorization as well, as how I actually specifically would target a particular type in NLP coaching to kind of almost kick them into gear to get them moving in the right direction with NLP. Each Enneagram type obviously is going to have a different approach. So that gets really fascinating as I move into that direction as well. Enneagram 6, honestly, their Enneagram of passions is fear. They actually have a fear of exploring themselves in itself. Going down into the mental abyss is so scary for an Enneagram 6 that they tend to pull out. They're scared of it. That can be a very fearful thing, a very scary thing. And these aspects of myself are terrifying. You can say, these aspects. I don't want to face the truth. I don't want to face this. It's too scary. As you start exploring yourself, you start recognizing the very things that you may even be judging about yourself as having horrible. That's really part of my personality, and that's part of the 6. So if you're a 7-wing 6, or you're a 6-wing 7, 6-wing 5, or 5-wing 6, you may have a lot of that. You may feel that pull in that 6-wing direction, or that 6 direction, or even if 6 in your tri-type, you may feel that fear as soon as you start really exploring the labyrinth of your psychology. Right? 7 is gluttony, and this is not the gluttony of consuming food. This is gluttony of almost taking in everything, elements of life, kind of living life to the fullest in a way. I don't need to explore myself. If I maximize my life, I'll have everything I need. So I'm going to plan out a beautiful life. I'm going to plan out everything I need. Right? I don't need to add. I don't need to explore myself. That's not necessarily the answer, because I can always continually add other things. This is more of the traditional word of greed, but it's not so much they want to hang on to this stuff, because the Enneagram 7 is actually known to let go of a bunch of things. It's not greed per se, it's gluttony, as in I want to add these things, add these things, add these things. And it's the traditional sense of adding to the void. I'm adding to the void of my own personality, whatever I may be missing in my life. So, for example, if we take an Enneagram 7 and we put it in perspective of someone who's looking for a relationship, this is a really good example. They go from one relationship to another relationship to another relationship to another relationship to another relationship because they're filling this void. And one person may get old and they throw them away. And here's the next person filling this void. Oh, you know what? I need this instead. Throw that next person here. I need this instead. And they're adding, you know what? Screw it. I'll have 5 relationships at one time because now I can have all my needs. This person's my security. This person's my fun. This person's my sexual partner. This person's my best friend. This person's my muse. I got it all. This person's my teacher. I can add all these relationships to my life. Enneagram 7 is a well-developed 7, and I say well-developed in the sense of being very familiar with their own 7, will tend to plan out pretty excessively, have a vision moving forward. This is what I want to accomplish. Right? This is what I want to, these are the things that I want to gain and in what order, right? The sensory experience of life. I can add these elements and I think I'll be happy, right? So the Enneagram 7 is a really interesting one because they have a trap of idealism, which is the perfect life, right? The perfect life in which I can have everything. Everything's going to be perfect. Everything's going to be perfect as is, the perfect life. That's the trap of Enneagram 7, and they think it's actually freedom. I'm going to grab all this stuff, right? So the Enneagram 7, and I'm diving a little more into 7. I should. I think it's because I feel guilty for 7s because we didn't ever publish the 7 video. So I'm gonna add this real quick. The virtue of 7 is sobriety. And this is not sobriety from alcohol. It's sobriety from all these things they're adding into their life, and it's not materials even. It's the sensory experience. It's filling in the voids. Okay, so that's their typical virtue. So it's important that you guys understand these different Enneagrams because that's really going to help you figure out what it is that you're relating to. So you say you may not relate to the core fear. You may not be aware of the core fear, but you may be able to look at the actions that you're taking, the behaviors you're taking, and you can understand why those behaviors are there. And what is it that these particular Enneagram types are avoiding, right? Enneagram 8, this is the last one. Their passion is lust, and this is it's very similar to 7, and it's a lustfulness it's very much like if you understand sexual lust, it's desire. It's more desire than anything. I mean, the gluttony of the 7 is more acquisition in the sense of accumulation, okay, of sensory experience. The Enneagram 8 is more of the desire, the burning desire, the obsession. It's very different this way, but 8-wing 7s sucks to be you guys. I'm one of them, and you get you have the desire, and you have this burning, flaming desire, as well as this burning acquisition mindset. I have to have, and I have desire to have. So you get this mixture. This 8-wing 7 is a very struggle. It's a struggle, and not every Enneagram type is a struggle. I can only speak for 8-wing 7 because that's what I identify with most, and it's a hell of a struggle. Recognizing what it is to stop doing, recognizing what it is that you're avoiding, recognizing how you're seeing the world, your fixations in the world, right? And what it is that you're telling yourself. Every Enneagram type has a system of lies, things that they tell themselves or things that they do. And this is things that they do as a result of having a particular way. Now, Patrick, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. Patrick with Basement Overlord, visit his channel if you're really interested. He has done a great job talking about the Enneagram of lies. I don't know if he uses these terms, but he's done a great job producing videos on, as far as I think most Enneagram types now, and the Enneagram of lies, and talking about these aspects of Enneagram and how they pertain to each individual Enneagram type. So feel free to check his channel out. He's got some good videos on there. I don't need to produce those because he's done a great job. So I'd recommend you go check those out. As far as everything else goes, the Enneagram of Traps is actually one of my favorite Enneagrams because the Enneagram of Traps is what we think is the actual way. So the 9 thinks by being a spiritual master, you're going to see more of the 9-wing, the 9-3 tri-type, anything with 9 and 3 in there, as themselves seeing themselves as a spiritual master, a spiritual guru or whatever, or teacher or whatever it may be. The 9 thinks that the solution to their problem is being spiritual and seeking extreme spirit. And so they do this by a position of passiveness. They tend to be very passive. Well, I don't need anything in this world, so I'm just going to sit here and meditate. Nobody cares about material items. Nobody cares about any of this. None of this matters. In the all grand scheme of things, we die. So I'm just going to sit here and work my $9 an hour job and never really advance myself. That's the Enneagram of lies for the 9. right? That's the trap. That's the trap. I'm sorry. That's they think that by avoiding everything in reality that they're going to solve their problems, not to partake in reality. And this is called seeking. It's the trap of seeking. It's the trap of the 9 is that aspect. The Enneagram, the trap for the 1 is being perfect. Trap for 2 is having freedom. 3 is efficiency. 4 is authenticity. 5 is observation. 6 is security. 7 is idealism. And 8 is justice. And these traps, they think the 8, like I can speak for 8. I'll speak for 8 right now. The 8 typically, their trap is that life has been very hard. It's kicked my ass. And no matter how hard of a defense I've built up, I'm pretty ready for the world and face it. I can take anything down. But now it's time to have justice, defend those who are weak, stand for those who are semi-weak, and be the strongest person, and then make sure that justice is delivered. So the people who had done harm to me need to, they need to be rectified. Their actions need to be consolidated with me, and justice needs to be delivered in this way. And so the 8 spend their entire lives proving, not that they're great, but proving to the people who have done them wrong or done the people they care about wrong, that what their actions are wrong, and showing and demonstrating that. And 8s think that's the way to freedom, is by being a person of justice and delivering justice where no one else will. And this is a trap for Enneagram 8. So the solution to the whole Enneagram trap is actually the Enneagram of virtues, right? 9s actually have to take action, to stop being lazy, to live in the world, and to explore themselves with action and diligence. But 9s will tell me. 9s will say things like, well, I just don't feel motivated to do that. Or, well, I don't really, yes, 8s can be vengeful in their justice. 8s actually are known for vengeance. Their primary problem and their fixation, their ego fixation, if you look at the Enneagram of ego fixations, 8s are vengeance oriented. So yeah, that's a good point. But I would say that back to the Enneagram of virtues, the 9s are struggling with their virtues in the sense of action, right? And action is the way, the freedom, the path to freedom. Take action. Daily to-dos, they're very simple. They don't have to be complex. Very simple things. Like, okay, start with moving your bed from the mildew-infested corner over here to the less mildew-infested corner of your room over there. Or whatever it may be they've been ignoring for some time. The 1s, approaching with severity, having this aspect of, I've got to make sure that I am doing this particular thing for the right reason, but also being diligent in my understanding of those things. So having a sense of severity is incredibly important to an Enneagram 1. And a lot of Enneagram 1s, I think they put themselves in the sense of this moralistic perfection trap. And I really want to talk about this, but I think I don't have enough time to talk about this. But the sense of perfection, this moralistic perfection that the 1s have. So I'm gonna put this as a future note to really going into that. But the 1s need to be hard in a different area. Instead of being hard on other people for their sense of, or their lack of morality, the 1s are, their solution is actually gauging their own severity toward themselves and others, and recognizing that others are on their own life journey as well. And the moral inactions that may be present today don't necessarily carry over through the remainder of one's life, nor do they need the autocorrection, right? So all this requires something that the 9s, to me, the 9 is the very center of the Enneagram. If it were up to me, I'd put 9 in the center of the Enneagram, because 9 is where it all starts. The 9 in all of us is where it starts. And that is the connection to higher consciousness, right? The 9 is the backbone, in my opinion, of the Enneagram. It all starts there. The ego was developed from 9. It moved to 3. Then 9 to 6 to 3. That's the basic triangle of Enneagram. If you look at it, that's the core triangle of Enneagram. There's the 9, the 6, the 3. And the 9 is where it all starts. And this can be, if you can look at this biblically, you can look at this pretty much in any major world religion, major world philosophy. You can see that the fall, as it's called in Christianity, but it doesn't matter what religion you can relate it to, is where the ego is created. And if you can look at the scripture in a sense of almost a metaphysical way, whether it's Christian scripture, or whether it's any ancient Buddhism scripture, or any other major world religion, you're generally going to see that the creation of the ego is our biggest problem. And that starts with 9. That's separation, right? Being separated from consciousness. recognizing that you have a body, and the 9 is the center of the body's center, recognizing that the body is the physical barrier that separates you from everything else. And that can be very deceiving to a person who isn't aware of the model of Enneagram. So as far as bringing back to a major loophole or a major hole or major loop, going back earlier, credibility doesn't matter here, it's principle. What are we really looking at, right? What is it in Enneagram that really makes sense? And to me, if you really understand the ego, the aspects of Enneagram are like, okay, yeah, that actually makes sense. That's it. So that being said, it's important that you guys understand that the Enneagram is going to take a while because there's all these different Enneagrams. Enneagram of lies, Enneagram of traps, virtues, passions, fixations. You've got these different Enneagrams. You got to see how they play a role. Then you start seeing the whole type. My advice to people who are studying Enneagram now is to not look at type descriptions of Enneagram. Okay, because if you look at type descriptions, you're going to get the 8 is very aggressive. The 8 wants to punch everybody in the face. The 8 hates people. The 8 wants to kill everyone. And then you get the 5. The 5 knows everything. Knowledge is all. And you get these really BS type descriptions. Instead, if you look at all the Enneagrams, you get a true picture of that type painted in your mind. And then maybe you can write your own description of how that Enneagram comes out. But I wouldn't even waste time writing a description. You have a core understanding of that type if you look at across the board of what those Enneagrams look like. You can say, okay, I see why this behavior manifests in an 8, or I see why this behavior manifests in a 5 or a 3 or a 2 or 1. I see what's coming out as a result. Because I can tell you over the years that the 8 has gotten less, as far as the 8 in myself has gotten way less aggressive. It's been much more calm. Does that mean that I have shifted and transcended Enneagram? I wish. I can tell you I'm still built in my own ego fixation. So that is not the case. I do have a sense of aggression that still comes out quite a bit, but it has calmed over the years. And that's what it's really, it's about transcendence of Enneagram. So I've never really found much privilege in saying that I relate to all 9 Enneagrams. It's just, I think I have an awareness of how these Enneagrams operate and these types operate within myself. And I can see every Enneagram in myself. It's definitely there. And I think if you keep exploring, you can see how all these particular aspects of Enneagram manifest in your own personality. So, and core fear. Let me pull my little thing up here. The core fear of 4 is the. Background noise here. Okay, so the core fear of Enneagram 4 is their trap. Let me talk about the lies, anti-self, because like I said, the Enneagram 4 is a lot of different things. Enneagram 4's main thing is envy, and their fixation is melancholy. Okay, and so you're going to see a lot of Enneagram 4s. The stereotype for Enneagram 4 is depression. It's sadness, depression, and their sense of envy, right? So you have a core fear. I guess there's a core fear of not being unique is what the descriptions say. Core fear of not being unique. But if this sounds kind of bullshitty to me. And the reason why is because here's the problem. People look up Enneagram and what they see is they see, I don't care about being unique. And then they reject it. They might actually be a 4. So I don't think 4s walk around. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think any 4 has really related to wanting to be unique. In fact, I feel like when people say they are a 4 because they want to be unique, I am tempted to think that they might not be a 4. Because unique is an attachment concept. Someone else was talking about it, and that makes more sense to me. Because the type itself, it seems to me, is formed around feeling like you're deficient or different from others. So you've always had this identity of yourself as that. So it's like, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it does.
I have a good way to illustrate that if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I read, because the thing is, I like to believe that childhood wounds have something to do with it, but I'm starting to believe that it not necessarily has to do with childhood wounds, that mainly it's just childhood wounds can play a part, and there's some that, would possibly make your type more prevalent in your personality. And the ones that I read were the childhood wounds for type 4 would be a parent not necessarily playing a very major role, kind of like leaving, or one of the guardians leaving. So what that makes one think is that they left because you weren't enough, or you couldn't get enough attention. Like your being and who you were was not enough to be noticed, or for them to treat you as you probably should have been treated. And so just kind of like your needs and stuff like that, and just recognizing you as a person, I think. And so the person feels that they need to create more identity in order to feel like they, almost like they take up space, almost like they need to create more identity so that they feel like they're a person in the room. And I guess if we model it off of that specific childhood wound, it would be to get the attention back from the parent. But I don't think, of course, that that's always the thing that causes you being a type 4. You know, I think that it could be anything really, but I think that's probably the best way to portray type 4, is that they're really just trying to create more identity. They feel like they're not deficient, like you were saying.
I also think that since 4s have such an attachment to their feelings, and they're often like said to be over dramatic, I think I can see the whole wanting to be unique thing there in a sense, because it's like I feel this way and no one else feels this way, and they don't understand me. So I'm different from everyone else and no one will ever get me. But they actually do want to connect, I guess, to that origin that Enneagram talks about.
Yeah, I think that you brought up another good point, and that's like, you know, they're like, oh yeah, I you know, I'm different. My feelings are different. You can't understand it. And I think that the 4s primarily want to stand out, because maybe it's like, it was almost like a feeling like you were in the back of the crowd, you know what I mean? Like almost hidden, concealed. And so if you stood out enough, then, you know, you wouldn't have to. I think that's where the unique aspect of the 4 comes in. So a lot of people, you know, there's some stereotypes that portrayed in a negative light, but what we have to understand is that every Enneagram type, you know, is kind of negative. So you have negative aspects of the types. And so for 4, I wouldn't really say it's negative. I mean, of course, just as negative as all the other ones would be. But I definitely think they do want to connect to the true self. But it's interesting because the 3 rejects identity and just kind of camouflages their way through, while the 4 feels theirs is not enough, and so they need to create more instead of just appreciating what they already have and who they already are. And that's just from what I read, and it made a lot of sense. But someone asked permission. Go ahead and chime in if you'd like.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So you said something earlier, Trey, about the childhood wound, and I have seen frequently relating the childhood and the sort of sorry, the word's escaping me. The conditioning.
The childhood wound from 4?
Yeah, the conditioning, that your Enneagram type is almost, that I wouldn't say absolutely determined by your conditioning that you received as a child. And it's funny because I view the Enneagram as being the attachment to the ego. Well, not necessarily the ego, but the ego's attachment to the family life and the roots. I'd say that would be the emotional aspect to it, or the so when I attribute the conditioning to the Enneagram, and I, not necessarily on my own, have come to the conclusion of finding that in order to overcome these fears, I guess, of these feelings of inadequacy or insecurity, that perhaps it's something to do with what this one man that I've been reading by the name of Alan Oken calls loving detachment, where you learn to, by self-reflection, looking through and finding, okay, these are what my conditioning has been. Like, this is what my religion tells me that I've been following since I was a child, because my parents told me to. This is my parents' way of thinking. This is my grandmother's. This is my teacher from 5th grade that's telling me this stuff that I just adopted as my own. And so seeing that as, I'm sorry, there was a point to this. I seem to have lost it.
Were you going to bring into question whether or not if that's true, that it wasn't received from childhood?
Oh yeah, that was what I was going to say. Sorry. Would it be reasonable to apply this notion of loving detachment, not necessarily repression, but being able to look at something and realize that it's not your own, and that this is an insecurity that has resulted from conditioning? Would you be able to use that concept for all Enneagram types, or would that only be, let's say, for a certain few of the types, like maybe only a certain center?
Well, I think what you were saying, I just want to make sure I got it right. Are you saying that, because I said that the 4 tries to create identity to sort of get the parent back, and just in that example, or using that as a reference. So is that what you're saying? Does that work for all of them? Is that what you're asking?
Not necessarily getting the parent back, but realizing the difference between the parent and yourself. Sort of, realizing their ideas, and you're removing yourself from your conditioning.
So are you like saying stepping outside of yourself in a way, like the self that you're used to, just saying that you don't have to act on whatever fears or anything that comes up? Like, is that what you meant?
Yes, I do. And
I think that could be useful for all types. Yeah. I feel like that's what the Enneagram is trying to get you to like go towards as well. So.
Right. And I understand that there's different ways to go about it depending on your Enneagram type, because you wouldn't want to, I would just want to see what that would look like for some of them, like ones that might have a difficult time realizing and separating yourself from that idea and becoming more familiar with the idea of loving detachment. So
yeah. So which one?
I'm not sure. I'm not too familiar with all the.
Okay.
And too in-depth familiar with all of them. I have a general sense, but I wouldn't be able to apply it with this.
Okay. Sorry, I just want to make a really quick point. I was just going to say that when it comes to what I read in a book was that most of the types are trying to detach from something.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually because I was reading the chapter on my type, which is type 5. And they were saying that the issue is that with the type 5s, they are attached to attachment. So what do? You know? But there are different solutions and different routes you can go to, ultimately detach. I'm going to let speak.
I was just going to say that I've kind of tried that. And the first like problem sort of I had with that is that I felt like I didn't feel alive enough, if that makes sense. Because I wasn't attached anymore to my feelings or my more painful feelings that made me feel alive. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, that makes perfect sense. I feel like
that was the reason I like wanted to go back to my ego as opposed to like just sort of seeing it as from outside, if that makes sense.
Because like as a type 4, like you're a 4, right?
Yeah.
You see, I was talking to you about like type 4s the other day, and I was gonna comment about like how for a 4 to like detach from their feelings, that's not a natural state for them. Like I was going to say that like if anything for a 4, like yes, they can get too self-absorbed, but detaching from themselves from their feelings isn't going to solve it. Like they have to go back to the original feeling to get that validated, and then because their self-expression, like you can't tell a 4 to just detach from their feelings. That's never going to work for them. It's more about balance than anything. Like detaching, you can detach yourself to see like yourself from a perspective, like maybe a third person perspective, but to detach yourself from your type would be impossible. It's more about seeking.
I didn't mean that I detached myself from my type. It's just that I didn't feel as compelled to act on my feelings. Like I felt a little bit more peaceful or calm, but I could still feel my feelings. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay, I understand what you mean better now.
No.
So you were saying that this time you were at peace with your feelings, but you weren't making rash decisions based off of them?
Yeah, I didn't feel as compelled to act on my feelings. Like that fear or
Did that
that
make you feel less human?
desire you get to, huh?
Sorry. I said, did that make you feel less human?
That makes me feel less alive for some reason.
To act on, I mean, you still have the emotions, so if you feel it, then you feel human, but not acting on it, I can kind of see where you're coming from. I don't know. It's a weird thought. I don't really know what to say.
There's something I want to add that's semi-unrelated to this, but it's something I do want to add before I hop off here at some point, is that there's a question here, basically a comment that was made that, a type wouldn't do this particular action. And this is compartmentalization. And this is what a lot of people do is when they understand type, they say that you can't be this type because you do this. And I can tell you that this is not necessarily true. I think this particular comment said that, the 8 wouldn't be concerned with how people should act and wouldn't care about changing the world in a moral way. It depends. If the 8 is looking and seeking justice, their justice could be moral justice, right? And that could be their own trap. I think by limiting and compartmentalizing type to a particular perspective, which is 8s are not concerned with morals, is not necessarily true. They have their own system of morals. It may not be the social conformity, it may not be what is accepted as a norm, because they're an 8 after all. They're not going to take on other people's vision usually of this type, but they could. And when humans are very complex creatures, and we're very, very complicated, there's no absolutes. It's very hard to be very absolute in a particular type. Ironically, let me put it this way. Paradoxically, the INFPs, their second most common type is 8. People are like, what
For
the hell?
INFPs?
Yes. And the first most common for INFPs is 4, then it's 8, then it's 9. And people have a hard time wrapping their head around that. What the hell does an INFP 8 look like? Right?
Ragnar.
Right. So you get this sense of control that's associated with the INFP 8. And there's many variations of that, but why would an INFP be an 8? So that's the real thing that you have to understand about this, is that you can't compartmentalize, because a lot of people have this preconceived notion that the INFP is this passive, I love everyone, let's hug trees, hippie, blunt smoker, right? That's kind of the stereotype of INFPs as far as MBTI goes, that they just go around and question their type for eternity while hugging trees. And that's so when you see an INFP being their 8 as their second most common type, you're just like, what the hell? What does this look like? There's too many variations to say.
I think it's pointless to even try to combine or like overlap the two different systems like that. Like they should just be kept separate. They're measuring two completely different things.
Yes, but you can also be male and white at the same time, right?
Yeah.
But so there are just two different systems of measurement. So you can be INFP and 8.
Exactly.
So if the cops are looking for me because I committed a crime, they're going to say it was a white male. They're not just going to say I was white.
Yeah, it was white. Well, white what? White.
Because it better describes the individual.
So that's all we can say.
I don't understand the point of that anymore.
So the key is to understand that INFPs can be 8s, and the reason why I'm saying this, because there is a lot of commentary that's saying that, well, like just earlier, like a type 8 wouldn't be concerned with moral justice. Well, an INFP 8 is a very moral type of character in general, in the sense they're guided by a system of morality, right? So it's going to be very different than ENTJ 8. It's going to look different than, say, any other type that's an 8. Now, I know Taylor is an 8, and Yaylor, he's an 8 over here, demigod, and he probably has a different way of executing justice in a very godlike, wrathful way. So there's probably that aspect, which is very different than your human, lesser being way of demonstrating justice and delivering justice. So what I'm saying here is that we can't compartmentalize all these types and they would never do this. You can say that the majority of these types are unlikely to do this, yes, But to completely rule something out because it doesn't quite fit a description is I think is very limiting. And that's when you kind of get ejected from an entire system, because there's aspects of any Enneagram type that I don't relate to, yet they're all present in my personality. So that being said, I'm going to mute my mic and camera for a little bit, and Trey or Taylor or anybody else, you can carry on.
Yeah, sounds good. Do you have questions or anything you want to talk about?
Yes, I don't feel that there is it's hard to get into fully properly, or what I would consider properly get into Enneagram, because there's what seems to be so little information, and the information that I do find on it is a bit, it seems a little contrived, and like there's
a lot of mixed knowledge.
Yeah, there's too much. From what I have divined is a lot of, that, as Damon was saying, compartmentalization going on. It gets a little frustrating because people are putting themselves into boxes rather than trying to make the system fit them. They're trying to fit into the system. And it's almost a little disheartening sometimes, because then we see people do this to other people, not just themselves. And I mean, what do we really do to get out of that? Do we keep?
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I mean, because it makes it's almost like you're devaluing both yourself and other people, when instead of focusing on the individual and how the system may fit to the individual, you're focused on how the individual may fit in the system. It's just, I don't know. You have a really good point.
It's basically just being irresponsible with the information and just being disrespectful in general and not really thinking anything thoroughly through.
Yeah,
which is why you have to set an example, which is why you can't really tolerate it, you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sorry,
I think
some bullshit, but
I think one of the big problems is that when it comes to like MBTI and like, well, I think it's more so an Enneagram. People say, oh, I'm a 5, or I'm a 541, or 514, or whatever, right? And they associate themselves with that. But the issue is you actually are all of the Enneagram. You actually deal with all these issues on some level. And so you have aspects of each type in you. It is a complete, it is just different aspects of the same both of the side of portraying your ego and also portraying your view of consciousness, right? Because that's actually, if you go through the holy truths and all that, it goes through each one and, how each one looks. But we associate with one and we say, oh no, you're not a 5 because you did this. Great example. I think I'm a great example for this. I'm a type 5 SX. So there's a more emotional side to SX type 5, not to mention I have 4 in my tri-type. There's, 5s do seek for a partner. And I'm not saying that SX is all about, seeking for a partner, but it just makes this person who doesn't really look like a type 5. And you're like, no, you're not a type 5. But I mean, I've studied it and I know what the core issue is for me. And it is detachment. I have a problem with not really engaging with anything. And it's a problem for me. And for me, I think that, when you it's kind of ridiculous. It's almost like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to set up a system where we have 9 types, right? And if you don't fit that type, I'm going to argue with you. If you're going to bring up the system in the first place, it should be to get along or to use it as some great tool, not to start conflict with each other and be like, oh no, you're not that type. What are you talking about? I mean, this is decent courtesy and respect that should go around and say, oh,
it just comes down to irresponsible people.
And I mean, I'm sure all of you spent time looking at your Enneagram type, and you may have concluded, or you may not have concluded, or you may have said, maybe later you'll change. I don't know. Maybe, it's a journey. And for me to say, you're not that type, and I know it for this, I can suggest something or ask to suggest something, but to tell someone that they're not that type. I mean, even when I believed I was ENTJ, which I don't know if everyone here remembers that, but I actually believe I was ENTJ. And there's reasons why. There was a lot of things I was dealing with. So But now I kind of get out of things and started to kind of sit back into my natural preference, where before I would get criticized quite a bit for just about anything. It made me not really care. So I don't know, there's just a lot of things that influenced me. And when I got out of the environment I was in, you know, it allowed me to kind of rediscover another aspect of me. For people who were online telling me I was ENFJ all the time, you know, I was only extroverted because I was kind of being forced to. If I wasn't paying too much attention in the social group, I'd get criticized for it. You know, why aren't you paying attention to everybody? You know, like, it's like, sorry, I zoned out. Like, what else am I supposed to do? You know, like, it's just, I was constantly trying to find things that I could talk about, find things that I could think about, like looking at things for the purpose of not understanding them, but just to bring something up. Like, oh, look, here's this pen. All right, I could talk about this with this person. Like, I know quite a bit about that. So, you know, I was trying so hard to be extroverted, and it was draining, but started to learn over time that for me, it was much better just to spend time by myself. So, you know, we go through struggles, and I recommend for everybody that's watching the video and everybody that's part of our channel, just if you think someone's not a certain type, maybe offer to talk to them. You know, just, you know, if you want to, I personally believe that you're this type. Here's what I want to bring some evidence. You know what I mean? In a more respectful, courteous way, instead of like, you're not that type. It's just,
well, that's just ridiculous. And honestly, it's not like it's not like it's anybody's right, or it's not like it's their business. And that's really unfortunate that, well, I think that everyone should have their type, be open to their type being questioned and like kind of discussing it and stuff. But I feel like to be so attached to the situation as to be so certain or convinced and forceful, or take it to that place, that's just irresponsible and kind of fucking stupid. And you should definitely avoid that. And I think it's good to just be open-minded about it and sort of entertain different ideas or perspectives, of course. But when you get attached to it and start basically attaching your sense of self or identity or whatever the fuck, and then it spirals into some debate or something, like, that's just like, I feel like you should be more respectful of, like, and you should sort of you should be more open-minded. And I think that, like, it shouldn't be about convincing people of anything, because that's really up to the person. It's not really any of your business to, like, it's not your business or your job to convince anyone of anything. And it's also not your business or your job to prove anything to anybody. You shouldn't feel like you have to prove shit to people. Be independent, you know? So, yeah, it ultimately, like, those sorts of situations just come down to being irresponsible and sort of unproductive in general, and sort of just, it's just ridiculous. Don't engage in it.
You know, I think we're actually lucky in this community to have the Enneagram around, because it's actually kind of funny. Like, we're in the typology community, and we're like, oh, what's this Enneagram? Cool. Like, you got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's awesome. And then, like, you know, you're researching it and stuff, and then come to find out, like, it's all about, like, enlightenment and consciousness, and there's a whole other dimension of it, and you're like, what? And, like, you know, it's just a weird thing to find in a place like this. And we're lucky, because thing is, in the typology community, most of us are associating with these types to feel like we have a place, to have some, like, something to associate with. And while we also use it, or some of us use it for that, and others use it for, like, you know, just a tool to understanding how to better navigate your life. And some use it for both. Whatever you're using it for, I know that it's an issue that a lot of us associate with the type or whatever it is. And now that we have the Enneagram here, we can kind of recognize that that's what a lot of us are doing. And I think that when, you know, it's kind of interesting, you recognize online, you know, people may fight online about, like, we were actually just talking in the chat earlier about how Light Yagami may have been a type 7, 1, or 8. We were all, like, on different, and I can see where they're coming from, and I can see where I'm coming from. So I'm like, okay, well, you know, that's cool. Thing is, we all have different opinions, and you see people online take fictional characters or people, and they argue their type. But what's crazy is they never really get to the point where it's like, you're stupid, blah blah blah. You know what I mean? What gets people to that point is when they're arguing over their own type or someone else's type, like that's in the community, in the group discussion. And why do you think that they're being so defensive? Because they found something to associate with, and then the other person's just saying, no, you're not that at all. And I mean, they came here for comfort. They came here for understanding, whatever it is that they came here for. And I just think it's, personally, I think we're just lucky to have the Enneagram in our community. Sorry.
So, I mean, like you said, it's natural for people to like question your type or say that they see this other type in you that you don't associate with your core. So things like that would get me like, make me feel pretty triggered. But I still kept going back for a really long time, like for months. And I think it made me understand myself. Oh, there's an echo.
Can someone mute their microphone? Sorry. No. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Now.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say that it made me understand myself better and better able to deal with people asking my type because, I don't know, I'm just more certain about who I am than I was before. And I still have a lot to grow towards, but that's one of the reasons I am okay with like that kind of conflict online.
Yeah. So if any of you guys have anything left to say, we also have some questions in the live chat. So I'm just going to ask you guys before we move on to those, if you have any questions or any comments.
Yes, I do. Just one more thing.
Okay.
Okay. I see the problems arising with the questioning of other people's types, their Enneagram type specifically, when I think we're getting too specific with our idea and we're getting too narrow with our idea. We probably should be sticking with very general and vague concepts of these. Like, I think the circle with the word behind beside the number would be sufficient enough. You know, I think the more we get specific and the more we become diluted with these preconceived notions, we start, I guess, sort of constructing archetypes, specific archetypes that we place upon people. Once they don't fit that, then yeah, we see something wrong with it and they don't fit into that. But yeah, and then there's the behavior aspect coming up again, where people are treating Enneagram like it is something that if you don't act that certain way, you're not this type. But I see it as being the in-between point between the manifestation of a particular problem. So yeah, I don't know how if that works for somebody else. It's just sort of the addressing of that there is an issue, but you got to work for it yourself to see what that issue is.
Yeah, you know, I actually had an idea recently, which I don't want a lot of criticism from this, because truthfully I haven't finished the idea out or anything like that. But it's just something recent that I just thought about, which was I had this idea that there's a possibility that most of the time when people get upset about something, like, oh, like you shouldn't have done this or that or whatever, I think a lot of times it has nothing to do with the other person. And I actually think there's a possibility that it may never be any other time. Like, I think it always has to do with yourself and something that you're dealing with. And I think a lot of times we can't handle the feeling or whatever it is we're dealing with, and we project it out. So I don't know, it's just like it's what you were just talking about with us and being so defensive and stuff. Like, is it because the other person actually did something, or is it because it just whatever they did reminds us of this or that? You know what I mean? It's almost like to criticize anybody else around you, which even though we just kind of did that, it's kind of hard not to. But just to criticize anyone around you, I mean, there are people who could do better, but I don't really think it's anyone's place, as well as it's not my own. But all right, so I'm just gonna head over to the live chat and see what questions they had. So Someone asked me what my favorite color was. Blue. Why don't you think you're a type blank? Okay, well, I don't know what that type is, so I don't really, yeah. What Enneagram does INTP tend to be? I haven't managed to get any consistent results from the Enneagram test. I know an Enneagram type 3 INTP. I know that commonly TI and NI both produce type 5s. So that's something common. Both of those tend to be type 5s, but I've seen type 3 INTPs. I've also seen an INTP with 6 and is tri-type. So those are just some thoughts, ideas to consider. I actually think I know an INTP that's type 6, but I could be wrong on that. So, okay, no, that person earlier that said, why don't you think you're type blank? They were actually saying it's a good way to question why someone thinks they are not a particular type. To say, why don't you think you're a INFJ, for example, if I still thought I was an ENTJ? I was so dumb. Most of the people that I've talked with identify as INTP. All right, so that's pretty much it. We just pretty much have the question about INTPs and type 5. So, so what are you guys thinking about? What were you guys hoping to get out of the call? That's what I want to know.
I didn't know I was calling in until I was calling in.
Yeah. Did he put the link in the Slack group and he didn't even tell you guys it wasn't YouTube?
Well, I was using my tablet and there's this, one of the notices came up. I just boop, boop. Oh, here I am.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I just
chill.
Just to show up.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know nearly as much about tri-type or Enneagram as I do about the other things. And for a long time, I thought it was kind of hokey or subordinate.
Like astrology, for example.
But MBTI or Socionics. But then I started learning a little bit more about it, and it's interesting. I do think that your thing about the social, sexual, self-preserving, lining up with your tri-type makes a lot of sense for me too.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that because I mean that was just it was personal, it just worked for me. It's like cool.
I mean, just from the hip, I'd rather fight by myself. I'd rather, work on achieve something with a partner, and party with a whole group of people. Kind of simplified, but it is. Yeah.
So actually, Damon titled this "The Enneagram and the Ego Obsession." So if you want to, we can talk about the ego a little bit more.
I had an idea about ego where I was thinking about if someone was like dragged through mud or something, like if someone was basically subjected to a certain type of humiliation and how their ego would respond to that. I feel like someone who was not like attached to their ego or had become less and less dependent on it, or like their self-image or whatever, would be able to deal with that sort of humiliation really well. Whereas someone who was more dependent on their ego and having their ego be validated would probably be subject to more feelings of shame. For example, like I just thought of like, or if people were stripped from their identity, like imagine getting your head shaved completely and like, and being forced to like wear blank clothing where you were basically subjected to having no sense of like individuality or nothing to attach yourself to or attach your identity to. Because I thought that like it's great, because I was thinking about like it's great to have like decorations on yourself and like express your individuality in all sorts of ways, but if you can't even feel like yourself without those things, that's how you know that your ego is attached to them. If you're dependent on wearing certain types of clothes or looking a certain way or behaving or having a certain type of demeanor in order to have your ego be validated, that's how you know that you're dependent on your ego. If you were stripped down to the point where you were just wearing blank clothing, your head was shaved, you basically just look like a blank slate. And if you feel like you can't even be yourself at that sort of point, and if you feel like you have no sense of self because you're no longer attached to external ways of, your ego is forced to no longer attach itself to anything outside of itself. If you can't handle that, like if you have your head shaved, and yes, of course it's going to be a dramatic change and you might cry or something, but if you are at the point where you can't handle it, or you feel like your individuality or your sense of self and identity is dependent on those things, I feel like that's your ego attaching itself to things that don't, like, so your ego isn't your true self, basically.
I
Your
agree.
true self is beyond the things that your ego is attached to. So you should feel like you're totally yourself and completely at home with your body, regardless of whether your head is shaved or regardless of whether you're not wearing heavy eye makeup or wearing certain types of clothes or wearing having a certain type of demeanor, maybe. I feel like if you're overly dependent or attached, if your ego is overly dependent or attached to those external things, that's how you sort of lose your true self, if you can't even feel like yourself while you're separated from those things.
I think it's, I definitely agree with you. I think it's a good point, though, to bring up that I think that the types that would probably struggle with that the most would be the identity types, the heart types, 2, 3, and 4. That would be,
absolutely.
I disagree with
or at least the 3 and 4.
I disagree with it. I think that a lot of those things that you described are representations of yourself, not crutches, but decisions and expressions of you. So you're not dependent on it. It's a form of you.
Well, the idea is that, like, okay, because I've heard about people who are connected to consciousness, right? And if they were put in a situation like that, because I've heard where they've actually been put in situations similar, they seem to laugh it off or find something funny about it. Like, I don't know, just seem to make a joke or find something that's amusing or something that, you know, it's not something that they feel shame because they no longer have, you know, whatever it is, because they're not attached to it. And I think that a lot of what your ego is just being attached to something, being afraid of something, being attached to something.
I know how that shit goes.
Huh?
I went to Catholic high school. I know exactly how that shit goes. I did it for 4 years. Fuck, I lost my train of thought.
Janelle, stop.
It's called being
So the way that I
Janelle's doing that.
Hi guys.
Shut up. Janelle just does that look and it just kills me. It's almost like she's giving me that look like everyone should know exactly what she's making that look for, but there's nothing going on.
I'm just here, wanting to talk about Enneagram and ego.
What were you thinking about, Joe?
How good you look.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You all know I'm ugly.
Well, I think that ego. I think ego is good to an extent. I mean, just like everything else ever, there's balances.
Right. Just to sort of interject in there, sorry. The way that I've heard it described is there's 3 aspects to the ego, which is the emotional self, which, like, I've already talked about with attachments and to your conditioning. Then there's the physical body, and then there's the lower mind. And they say that if all 3 of them are going in different directions, to view it as sort of like a chariot with the 3 horses. And the conscious self is you, the person who's guiding it. And if they're all going in different directions, you have utter chaos. But if you have all of them working together and you understand that these need to be working together, that you could actually put some direction into it and use that as an expression and a direct physical contact with the world. So it's the spiritual self's connection to the world. So yeah, you don't really want to detach yourself or destroy that part, because you need it to let's say connect with other people who are overly identifying with that, because there may be something that if someone's like obsessed with their physical body, that you might see something potentially in there that you could help them with, but you're unable to do that if you yourself are not in touch with your physical body or the same way that you can connect with them. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Enneagram doesn't just have to do with just over identification with stuff. Because the thing is, like, let me just talk about the heart types really quick. 'Cause it'll help paint out my idea. So for the heart types 2, 3, and 4, they're all seeking love, and there's an identity change. There's something that they're doing to feel like they can achieve love. So for 2, it's a lot of times it's people will love me if I'm helpful to them and if I provide for them or whatever. And so you see a lot of 2s go out of their way to get you to love them, as in just helping you and making sure you always have what you need. Especially if they have 6 in their tri-type as well. I've seen like 2, 6, 1, and as a core type 2, and it was insane. There was never an end to providing for the people around them. And what it did is it brought them to the point where that person would get upset because no one seemed to appreciate them for all the work they were doing. And it's because if you do it so much, people get used to it. If you do it all day, every day, always fulfilling someone's needs, they forget that you're even there at some point. I mean, and not necessarily everyone would do that, but I'm just saying for that person, they were no longer given that love for what they were doing. So just point being, for the 2, that's something that they did. For the 3, they're just trying to sort of like camouflage, run around. That's how I see the 3. I don't know. It's kind of hard to express the way I want to. But then with the 4, these are all identity things that they're dealing with. 4, creation of identity. 3, rejection of identity. And 2, sort of taking on a helping role. So with the 5, 6, 7, the 8, 9, and the 1, they're entirely different animals. It's not like identification with stuff. It's not. It's mainly. I mean, I would say that it's mainly just for 5, 6, and 7. It is definitely fear, and I don't just say that because I just recalled it, but because I actually was thinking about the best word to describe it, and fear was the first one to come up. 5, 6, and 7 all deal with fear and how they should handle it. So, I mean, that's for me. When I got in the Enneagram, I didn't understand like why are these types the shame, and why is this fear, and why is this anger? I don't get it. Like 1 doesn't seem angry.
So wouldn't 5, 6, and 7 identify with their thoughts?
Probably the 5. I don't know so much about the 6 and 7 as much as I do my own type, the 5. But I know for sure that the 5 does identify with their thoughts quite a bit. But I wouldn't say that the
types still have an ego that revolves around something. So I feel like with the heart types and them having a particular self-image that they want to be validated, I think that the rest of the types are still seeking validation, just in different ways. Like a head type would probably want validation, reassurance for like, I don't know, I'm not going to think of an example. I'm too fucking scattered for that. But I think that their ego still revolves around something. I think that for a 5, the ego would revolve around being a wise person, right? Or being a person who is competent and knowledgeable. Like I think that that's what their ego would revolve around. It wouldn't be so much about like self-image necessarily and wanting other people to validate their self-image, as much as it's probably more withdrawn in the sense that they want their knowledge to be validated and feel like, and they invest their ego in that, right? So if I walk into your room, I want to feel validated in myself and my ego for being a knowledgeable or wise person. And that's my point about being put through a humiliating scenario would be like, if you took a type 5 and put them in a scenario where they've had no knowledge of anything and were pretty much useless because they didn't really know anything about a situation, that would be kind of a blow to their ego in a way. They would probably feel they would feel like shit because they didn't have they weren't in a position of power. They weren't in a position of being able to project any sort of sense of control or be a wise and helpful person through that. And so that's what their ego would revolve around. They'd feel like shit. It would be a blow to their ego if they walked into a room and didn't know anything about anything that was going on. It would be, that's their fucking fear, right? So that's why I'm saying there's an ego revolve around with each type, and it's their different issue. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that, sorry, I was going to say that for type 2, 3, and 4, I said they were dealing with the image. But the thing is, the reason I say that 5, 6, and 7, and 8, 9, and 1 are not is because, I mean, personally, when I deal with, if I deal with knowledge and understanding, right? I know a friend of mine who has type 5 and type 3 in his tri-type. And I have type 5 and type 4 in my tri-type. The way that we take hits to our ego are entirely different. And I'm not talking about the way that we take hits to our 5 or, So I'm mainly talking about the way that we take hits to our ego when it comes to the 3 and 4. Because when someone when he's in a tough situation when it comes to his knowledge, the way that he takes a hit to his ego is different than mine. And I know because we talked about it. And me still being a 5, he gets in a situation where he feels that he is not knowledgeable in the situation. It takes a big hit to his image. For me, I want to be seen as somebody who understands enough in an entirely different way that they've never seen before. So a lot of my friends will say that the way that I understand things is a little bit different from the way that most people would explain it to them. And that's because for me, I feel that I need to be unique, special, or different. The thing is, the personality, the ego, is like a big defense mechanism. It's like, I have to handle all this stuff that's coming at me somehow. So how do I handle it? So I don't really see the ego as a whole really being all about identity or the way that you look or the way that you come across or the things, I mean, attachments for sure. But when it comes to the way that I took an issue, for me, being a type 5, I'm not going to necessarily, as a type 5 at my core, get upset because I wasn't knowledgeable. It's not going to be about that. That would be a more of a 3 or 4 thing. And so, yes, I'm going to do it because I'm human, because I have those different types as a part of my personality. But when it comes to the 5 as its own type, that's not really not I look at it in a way. If the thing is, even being a core type 5, the core issue is the one I'm focused on, the core type. So my core issue is not the way I look. If I'm in a dangerous situation where I don't understand something, or I don't feel like I'm competent in understanding something, I feel a little bit helpless. But it has nothing to do with the way that I come across or what I'm associating with, what I'm identifying with. Yes, I do identify myself as an intelligent person, but mainly I don't even care about whether or not I'm intelligent or not. I just want to be seen as special, different, or unique. And when I say that, it's just because I feel that it just makes me finally get noticed.
Okay, now I understand exactly what you're trying to communicate to me. Yeah, you're right. Like the whole external way you're coming across and everything, that's all just attachment, or like how you look and stuff. Yeah, that's completely just ego attachments. What it's attached to, and the ego itself is more of like, it's probably the thoughts behind it. Like, well, I'm not going to delve into that, but because I'm just unraveling a bunch of fucking spirals.
The other side of the ego, if you follow that thought process to the other side of everyone's talking about pulling away from the ego and letting go of things, and it's Buddhist almost. At some point, the ego is just the will to exist.
What?
Ego is will to exist. If you reduce the ego far enough that you don't care about getting drugged through by it or getting your stuff taken away, just follow that course even further, and you stop existing. I had a better.
I lost you.
Point that I was ending at. don't
No,
have it anymore.
I understand. That makes a lot of sense too. I know what you mean.
I mean, the ego gets vilified, but it's why we're all alive.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Is it?
I feel like will to live is really important.
I don't know. I can't track onto that. I don't really get it.
What's wrong?
I said I couldn't really understand what the idea was.
So
Basically, oh yeah, go ahead.
the problem with the ego is that it causes pain through fear or dissatisfaction or disappointment, whatever mechanism it causes pain through, then reduce your attachment and become more in touch with yourself. But the less you care about what's happening to you and around you, ultimately you can go to the point where you don't care at all. I mean, the opposite of caring too much is not caring at all. If you don't care at all, you're not gonna go, Jesus, I need some Easy Mac.
You need what?
Easy Mac.
Well, here's the thing. The way that I've always heard about people who were spiritually enlightened didn't actually match that. But that is, I like the thought. I like the idea. The way that I had always heard about it, which it could be wrong, but was that when there's a need in a group, like let's say there's a social need, somebody, I don't know, there's someone needs a ride somewhere or something like that. Let's just say a basic need. The person, like, you know, I'm not saying this is everyone, but some people, because of their own struggles and their own issues that they're dealing with, they may say, no, I'm not going to give you a ride. And let's get a little bit dramatic here, like in a TV show, like a TV drama. You know, you got you got this really weird family dynamic, social dynamic where these people, like, if he gives her a ride home, then this person's going to be thinking about that and this and that. And so it might prevent him from moving forward and giving the person a ride home.
Oh, God.
Right? But they do need a ride home. Yeah, I know, it sounds ridiculous. But they do need a ride home. So the way that I've always heard someone who is connected to consciousness is not necessarily being connected to yourself, not being as localized and stuck to your own self and your own needs and desires. So when you are disconnected from that and ultimately connected, you're not just connected to you as your own individual, but you're connected to everyone in the room. So if someone had a need, regardless of what all is going on, they would understand what each person's needs are and act accordingly. And that's something that I've noticed in stories about these kind of people, where they get in situations, you know, where there may be a reason. A lot of us get in situations where there may be a reason that we want to hold back. And what a lot of people suggest is that if you ever think you're fully conscious, or you ever think you're connected, but then you get to a point where you know what's right and you're caught in inaction, then you're probably not, because the person who's connected would recognize that this is a need. It's almost like this. If I myself fully understood all of the reasons that I do everything, and this is an example I've used multiple times on the channel, I wouldn't judge myself. And I think this applies to a lot of people, because if I know what things made me feel a certain way, or what things made me do certain things, you know, just whatever it is, whatever I'm doing that I want to criticize myself or tell myself that I'm doing something wrong, if I understood all the reasons why I'm doing that to the core, to the root issues, the root struggles I'm dealing with, I won't judge myself, because I understand exactly where I'm coming from and why I would do something like that. So even if it is ultimately wrong, I'm not going to say what you did was so messed up and you shouldn't have done it. You know what I mean? Because in a sense, you understand why you did what you did. In the same sense, if you're no longer localized to your own self and you're thinking about the group, then you'll say, you're not going to judge someone else for what they did. See what I mean? You're not gonna chastise someone else for their actions, because you understand that there's needs that made that person, that drove that person to the decision they're making now.
All right, so wait. What does this have to do with the?
I'm getting to the point.
All right, get to the point.
I will. Just be patient. So, wrapping around, when it comes to the group and the social needs, I am going to eventually say, okay, well, I recognize that you have needs, and so I'm not going to judge anything. I'm not going to judge the group. I'm not going to judge anything that's going on because I understand why it's all happening the way it is. So now that I understand why it's all happening the way it is, I'm going to act according to those needs. And so now what you recognize is that you're not necessarily detached from the group and saying, oh yeah, I don't care anymore about this group at all, because you have a detachment from yourself now. But the idea of consciousness, of enlightenment and everything in between, is that it's all about connection to everything. And that would be other people. It would be freeing yourself from the ego attachment. And the way I like to put it is being localized to your own self and your own needs, your own wants, and your own desires, and recognizing that you're a part of something bigger and you're a part of something that's more whole. And that is what guides your actions and your decisions afterwards. So,
would you agree that people have to get in touch with themselves before they can get in touch with the whole?
Um,
As I'm just thinking,
Luca.
this sounds
I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
opposite of like, the rah self, promotion stuff. So everyone's got a different set of problems. There is a spectrum. I guess I'm playing devil's advocate.
Maybe. I don't know. I kind of lost you there. Because the thing is, when the whole thing about the ego and stuff is that we're trying to you probably are playing devil's advocate.
Well, no, but I'm not playing devil's advocate about something I don't believe in.
You know what?
I believe what I'm saying, even though it's a little bit devil's advocate. I do believe.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I'm not just trolling. I think.
Okay.
I think that if you're someone who's got low self-esteem or is self, diminishing, you don't need to. It would appear to me that you need to get in touch with yourself before you get in touch with the group. That if you go straight to getting in touch with the group, you're going to have a fucked up sort of self-cycle, whatever. You're going to be a number 2 down the drain.
You're going to be
Gotcha.
a beta male.
All right. So have you ever heard of Eckhart Tolle?
Working for now.
What?
Have you ever heard of Eckhart Tolle?
Yeah, I recognize the name. I don't know what it is, though.
So let me tell you a little bit about Eckhart Tolle's story, just really quick, and it'll be a pretty good way to explain this. Because you were saying that, let me just revisit it really quick. You were saying that you'd have to recognize yourself if you're like in a depressed or negative state. You'd have to recognize, be in touch more with yourself before you could actually transcend yourself, right? Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I see exactly where you're coming from. For Eckhart Tolle, I hear a little bit of echo. Someone please mute their microphone. But for Eckhart Tolle, he was super depressed. This really, really depressed guy. He said that he would, anywhere he went, he would try to find a way to commit suicide. And he'd say, okay, well, shit hits the fan. I'll just jump off this building, or I'll just jump off this whatever, right? So he would. What?
He wasn't very competent, was he?
Yeah, yeah. So he was really depressed. That's what he was saying. He was super depressed, and then one night he woke up in the middle of the night, and he thought, I cannot live with myself anymore. And then right there, when he said those words, he had a realization that he was saying that he could not live with himself. And so for him, he realized right there that there must be some differentiation between him and the myself that I'm living with. And so right there, he completely disconnected, and he just felt so alive and had all these feelings of love and peace, and it all just hit him all at once. Well, the next morning he was talking about how it was just the most peaceful life had ever been, and he couldn't explain all the emotions and just like everything that was going on. It was perfect, and he said he wouldn't change a thing. So he actually spent 3 years of his life after that sitting on a park bench in the most intense state of happiness and joy. So people would walk by and be like, how do I get what you get? And he's like, I don't know. I don't even know how it happened. Huh?
Give me $20 and take this.
Yeah.
Do you want that thing that he has?
What, to be extremely happy?
Well, I mean, to sit on a park bench and do nothing.
Well, no, I mean, it's not necessarily the idea that he was sitting on a park bench. It was just that he's painting a picture in the example that he could sit on the park bench with no money for 3 years of his life and be in the most intense state of happiness and joy. And that it wasn't because of money or because of his situation.
I know. You're focusing on the second part of it. I'm focusing on the first part. I'm saying, but if it requires you to sit on a park bench with no money for 3 years.
It doesn't require you. It doesn't require that. But people were asking him, how did you become so happy? How do I get what you get?
In spite of it. In spite of it.
Yeah, in spite of it. He was happy regardless.
You could sit on a bench.
No, if he was rich, if he was poor, it didn't matter. He was happy. And that's what people wanted.
Why is he choosing to just sit on a bench?
The bench is not really that relevant.
It's
really not.
relevant thing. He's not doing anything.
Oh, come on, Eric.
It's the idea, I suppose, that he doesn't really have to do anything to be happy.
Okay, but my question then is, why should we prioritize being happy over doing stuff?
No, because we prioritize doing stuff.
I don't really think he was consciously deciding that he was going to prioritize. Because the thing is, right after those 3 years, he was like, man, I'm going to do something with my life. He actually started researching why that happened to him. He got really interested. He started, diving into history and spirituality and learning all these different religions and trying to figure out what exactly happened to him. How was it that he came to this final conclusion of being intensely happy no matter what he does? And it's crazy. He sat out for 3 years and it was still there. He said nothing changed. He said he always felt that peace running in the background. It was like no matter what happened. And so he didn't know why.
Was he wrong to waste those 3 years sitting on the bench?
Was he wrong? I don't know. I would say he wasn't. He can do what he wants.
Well, sure, he can do what he wants. Is that a good use of one's time?
I mean, it's a parable. It's parable, so it doesn't matter. The point is that
is it a parable? I think it's an actual story.
Whether or not you buy it,
it is an actual story.
I think he's probably.
I'm addressing the parable. I'm saying.
Eric, I'm trying to make a bigger point, and you're really, really bringing in a microscope.
No, I'm not. That's not a microscope. You said he didn't do anything for 3 years. To me, that's the interesting part of the story. Why can't I focus on it?
Because I don't know a lot about it. He didn't tell everyone the minute details of his life. And it is interesting. I agree. I actually would like to know more as well, but I don't know anything about it. He didn't go that far into it. But, so, I mean, after that, he gets into it and he starts to learn exactly what happened. He learns about the ego and all that. So, finishing up and answering your question, hopefully, Taylor, you wanted to know whether or not you had to get more in touch with yourself. It didn't seem like he did at all. It seemed like he went straight from the immense attachment that he was with and completely just let go.
I mean, it seems like he went from one sort of fucked up to the other sort of fucked up. Probably. But my point is that I think ego is good. Of course, everything is certain. I think ego is a good thing. I think it sounds like it's getting a bad rap, and it's not getting any credit for the fact that it's the reason that we're all still continuing to bother breathing.
That we're all still what? Sorry?
Putting forth the effort to breathe.
To breathe.
So it comes down to balance then.
Right.
Well, the thing is, one of the holy aspects of the Enneagram is holy work. So if you're looking at the Enneagram from one perspective, you still experience all the other perspectives, just like life. So it's just one aspect of the same thing. So it's not like he wouldn't have worked or doesn't have the motivation to work or anything like that. Now, he didn't go over that specific thing because the reason for him telling the story was just to express the idea that it was regardless of his financial situation or anything else to do with his life. So the fact that he was on the park bench and he didn't have a lot of money, whatever, but he was still happy. I think the richness, how much money you have, your financial state, he was trying to express that has nothing to do with happiness. And so for him,
okay. Should it?
Should it?
Yeah.
Should it have anything to do with happiness?
I mean, should you naturally be happier when you make value in the world and therefore attain the accrued wealth accordingly? Yeah, obviously to me, it seems like you should be happier when you're working and getting shit done than when you're being lazy.
You mean when you're doing something for the world? Well, that's exactly what consciousness is about, is having a higher understanding, as in just not being fixated on yourself, looking at the group, saying, okay, I'm not the only one here, looking at the needs of everyone. So yeah, I think if there's any association that says that being conscious has anything to do with not working or being lazy, it doesn't.
Great.
You can be full.
I'm gonna help humanity by sitting on this bench. How's that helpful?
Okay.
It's not helpful, right?
No,
so
that's why later on he went out and learned what actually happened to him, because people wanted help. They wanted to understand.
Okay, so that brings back to my question: was he wrong when he was sitting on the bench?
No, I'm not going to say anyone did anything wrong.
Okay,
he can do what he wants.
Eric,
I know he can do what he wants. I didn't say he did something immoral.
Eric, are you stirring up trouble?
I'm not. I'm not trying to. I'm trying not to.
Eric,
I'm trying not to.
Listen to that. Argumentative.
I'm answering the question.
Eric's dropping red pill.
Eric, I'm gonna not because of you, Eric. I just want you to know this, but I do need to end the episode. So.
Okay.
But we're just.
I mean, we can all stay on here, but the thing is, we can't go too far. We've already gone on for 2 hours, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and end the call. But
What? 5 sluts.
Let's just say one last thing, that it's Eric's fault. Eric's fault.
It wasn't Eric's fault. I just didn't want to say, oh, we're ending it now that Eric showed up.
Thank you for having me.
Nice.
Oh, definitely. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Red pill.
Adios.
Hell yeah, the Betamax revolution.
It's going to take a second to end it.
Rise of TWFP. Fall of MBTI.
So you guys, just really quick, if you guys have
What was that?
you guys have any closing thoughts, go ahead and put it in the chat so that I can answer some of your questions.
I showed up
Sorry
a
if I
little
missed
late.
any that you guys already posted. No, it's fine, because I'm talking to people in the live chat on YouTube. So if I missed some of your questions while we were all discussing, I'm sorry about that. If you could repost them, that'd be great. And I'll try to get them answered before we end it. Guys, come on.
What's up?
It's just weird. I'm trying to figure out a way to end this call, because Damon's supposed to be the one to end it, but he's doing something else right now. So
Tell him to get the fuck over here.
So we're stuck.
No, because he's busy. I can't. But I'll figure it out. I think I know how to do it.
Well, then let's continue.
Oh, come on. I almost got it figured out.
Well,
that wasn't
hey,
an idea.
it's nice to meet you. I'm spacey.
Oh,
I space out a lot. And nice to meet. How do you pronounce that? Kopova? Kopiva? 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 What?
It's a annoying Greek.
All right, so I'm on the MBTV channel now, so I can end it. Let me check
You're
this
a Greek
quick.
woman. Okay.
Well,
Nice to meet you.
before I was on my my personal account, so I couldn't do it. All right, so it sounds like we're good. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Once again, if you guys want to come look at some more MBTI or MBTV content, you guys can. We've got more content on our channel, and I definitely recommend going to Basement Overlord on YouTube. Basement Overlord has his name's Patrick. He has a lot of really good Enneagram videos recently, and definitely for the guys that are already on here, for everyone that's joined the call right now, I definitely recommend that if you have any questions on Enneagram, it seems like Eric really knows what he's talking about, because his videos have been profound, and I actually really enjoyed his perspective and all the things he's talking about on there. So definitely go check out Basement Overlord's channel and the videos that he posted on Enneagram. You guys should join our Slack chat if you'd like to. Just go to the description down below, and you can join our community. And it's pretty much just a big chat room. You can get it on your phone, on the Slack app, and you can chat with people, bring up discussions, private message people, whatever. But all right, like I said, you guys have a great night. Thank you so much for watching.